Hello everyone, welcome to another Flesh and Blood video. It's finally time that we return to the hero that kicked off the Flesh and Blood deck list on this channel, Phi Rising Rebellion. I feel like it's been so long, but last set didn't really bring much for Phi to help him out, so I didn't end up making a deck list. And now, even though Phi is still not really the best hero in the meta, he did get a few cards this set that definitely make him a lot stronger. So with all of that, let's get started. Since Phi is a pretty old hero, I won't be reading his ability, but for those who don't know, a quick TLDR, Phi can start the game with a Phoenix Flame in his graveyard, just like how Dash Inventor Extraordinaire starts with an item in play. And then you can, once per turn, return a Phoenix Flame in your graveyard to your hand, as long as you have a certain amount of Draconic Chain Links or pay a certain amount of resource. That's pretty much it. It's just Phi can get a flame back every turn, and he starts with a flame in his graveyard. For the equipment, there are two different ways you can play Phi. This is a switchboard list. I just have the Mask of the Pouncing Lynx and the Harmonized Kodachis up top here, because this is what you'll be bringing in most of the time. But of course we do have the Ember Blade and the Mask of Momentum down there. You could of course sometimes play Mask plus Kodachis or Ember Blade plus Pouncing Lynx. That's really up to you. It depends on the matchup. Pretty much Mask of the Pouncing Lynx is for matchups that you're going to try to burst down, just like true races. You want Mask of Momentum into more matchups where you care about your value and getting a few more cards out, making your opponent block a little more. Kodachi is for decks who you're going to be able to lock down. These are generally later game decks, things like Guardian, where late game these threaten 2 cards out of their hand because they don't want to take the 1. And then Searing Emberblade is for matchups that it's hard for your opponent to block 3 attack. Think decks that have a lot of 2 blocks in them. Searing Emberblade is pretty good against, as well as notably Searing Emberblade is Draconic when Kodachis are not. That can matter for some effects. The rest of the equipment is pretty standard. Flamescale Furnace is the premier Draconic chess piece. Its effect doesn't matter in Phi, it's just a 2-block temper chess piece. It's here because it's Fridge. Tiger Stripe Shuko is pretty good in Phi since he does play a fair bit of attacks with 2 or less base power. It can just push through an extra damage every turn, kinda like what you do in Zen. In Snapdragon Scalers, because there are a few attacks we do want to just give go again. The rest of the sideboarded equipment consists of Findle Spring Tunic for matchups we want the resource value, that we don't care so much about having an extra block in the fridge. Spellfray Cloak, specifically for Kano, because Kano games as Phi don't go long enough for Tunic to actually matter. Nullrune Gloves. This can be a Spellfray Gloves if you want. I just like having 2 Nullrune, but again, this can be replaced. And Tide Flippers is generally the AB you'll be bringing pretty much all the time. It can still give go again to some of your attacks like Salto and Tenacity Lava Burst, but of course you can't on things like Snatch or E-Strike. That's okay. It's mainly here for the AB, and it's perfectly fine with it. Next, let's talk about the decks. Main board. Most of the normal suspects are here. We won't be going over them by a long stretch of time, so let's just run by them real quick. Blaze Headlong is a premier 0 for 4. If you've played another red, it gets go again, which Draconic is all about reds. We have Rainbow Brand with Cinderclaw because we have a fair bit of attacks that aren't Draconic. This can turn weapons Draconic, and that does definitely help with Phi's ability. I also think that yellow Brand with Cinderclaw is the best yellow attack we could be playing. You could be playing yellow Rising Resentment, but this deck only plays 2 cards in the main board that actually cost 1 resource. So the Rising Resentment's discount really doesn't matter. And of course, you're playing the red and blue no matter what 5 version you're playing. E-Strike, just because it's a good flexible card, it can get Go Again, it can get Power, it can draw you a card, it's a good snap target. Lava Burst is the just strongest 0 for 5 in your deck. It's the most consistent. Only red Lava Vein loyalty because it's not guaranteed Go Again. We are mainboarding 1 Phoenix Flame because you always want at least 1 in your deck when playing Fi. The reason I note this is because we are playing a second one in our sideboard for certain matchups. Our red and blue Rising Resentments because there are head jabs. Our red and blue Ronin Renegades because they are actual head jabs. Just both of them are draconic. Snatch because it can draw us a card and is a great snap target. Spreading Flames because it's one of our main pumps. Really good with the Brand with Cinderclaws. Brands can turn like your Kodachi's draconic, which lets you pump them up with Spreading Flames, which is pretty nice. Artivores because why not? This is an aggro deck. You play them. In some situations, you can spend a flame on an Artivore. I would only do that if you're up your second flame. But pretty good tool. Especially even when, sometimes you get extra blue attacks, you just banish one. It's a pump that can pump up some pretty wide turns if I can get. Salt the Wounds just because it's an extra target for your Mask the Pouncing Lynx. Sometimes it's bigger than Lava Burst, so you'll go for it. And Warmonger's Diplomacy because a very bad matchup for Fi is something like Azalea, and this card's very good into Azalea. Next, let's talk about some of the newer and more unique cards. We'll start with the card from Heavy Hitters that I actually kept in the list, and that is Tenacity. The other card being, I don't even remember what it is. The blue block 3 from that set kind of didn't stay in the deck, but Tenacity is something that's actually pretty nice. It's sort of like a reverse Salt the Wound, where it checks on number of cards defending instead of attacks that hit. This will be a great target off of Pouncing Lynx if you can get 1 hit through at the end and then grab a Tenacity when your opponent blocked with, say, their whole hand and a bunch of equipment, or most of their hand and a few equipment. Tenacity can come in for a whole bunch of damage. And then Part the Mistvale gave Fi 2 new cards that are really, really good. The one that I think is definitely the best and will probably stay in Fi for a long time is Rowdy Locals. This is a 0 cost, 2 power, 3 block blue, which means it's perfect for Kodachis. If it's defended by an attack action, it gets +2, meaning if your opponent puts an attack in front of it, it probably won't fully block it, which is great. Oh, sorry, it's any action card, not an attack action. So if your opponent wants to block this at all, they'll have to use equipment or a reaction, which is really good value for you. And on hit of a hero, you discard a card. Note that you have to do this if you have a card available. And then if you do, that hero you hit discards a card. This is incredibly strong with Fi's ability, since Fi can generate his Phoenix Flame back into his hand. A perfect turn for Fi would be attacking with his Brand with Cinderclaw, going into a Kodachi, throwing another Draconic attack, and then maybe throwing another Kodachi so you can spend your resources well. And then you throw Rowdy Locals. If your opponent blocks it, pretty much if it will hit, then you're going to add your Phoenix Flame to your hand. And then you're going to discard your Phoenix Flame to your Rowdy Locals to force your opponent to discard a card. The synergy this card has in Fi is incredibly strong since it's disruption that Fi never really got. Disruption right now in the meta is pretty important with aggro decks that can outdamage you doing an actually excessive amount of damage that Fi just can't keep up with. So a card like Rowdy Locals giving you a little bit of that is really useful. as well as if your opponent takes a turn where they're just not blocking with anything. Normally they have a hand that is incredibly strong, so making them discard a card could mess their whole turn up. As well as notably, it's a blue for our next card, Prismatic Leyline. This is 0 cost yellow, block 3. It gives your next red attack +1, yellow attack +2, and blue attack +3, and then it has go again. This card is incredibly strong, giving a +6 value for free. And in Fi, it's even better, since it turns all of your 0 for 3s into breakpoints. Rising Resentment, Brand with Cinderclaw, Ronin Renegade all become 0 for 4s. The reason we're even on yellow brand is so we can have extra yellow attacks for our Prismatic Leylines. Even though the deck only has 5, if we don't activate the yellow, this card is technically still a 0 for 4, since it's very common for us to activate our red and blue version, or red and blue effects of this card. And this card turns our blues pretty much into reds, making them 0 for 4s as well, which is incredibly strong. Prismatic Leyline is also really good with Rowdy Locals, turning it into a 0 for 5, meaning even most defense reactions can't naturally defend the card. I don't know if Prismatic Leyline will end up staying inside of Fi, but for now, this is an incredibly strong tool to pump over and push through damage that our opponent might not be ready to block. This Fi list has a 54 card main board, which means we will be adding in 6 cards every game, so let's go over the sideboard. Starting with the defensive options, 3 Sink Belows and 2 Reinforce the Line. The reason we are on these numbers is because into the decks we want to be bringing these into, which is our Guardian matchups normally. Phoenix Flame is going to be another card we'll want to be bringing in because it can help us with any situation where if we get fatigued, we need 2 flames. Vi is a hero that is very hard to fatigue simply because his pressure with Phoenix Flames is incredibly strong. Also with Searing Emberblade, if you have Searing Emberblade as well as both of these Phoenix Flames, it is incredibly hard to fatigue Vi, which makes having a second flame in your sideboard really important, as well as Mystic matchups. Since all of them play Passover, you'll need to find a second Phoenix Flame so you don't get absolutely destroyed by a Passover in response to your Fi ability. Because, of course, if they pass over your flame while it's in your graveyard, you haven't activated Fi yet, you can respond yet, sucks to lose a blue, but you can still save your Phoenix Flame. If they wait for you to Fi and then pass over, it really, really hurts because you want to use your Phoenix Flame in so many situations. But 5 defensive cards because you don't really need full 6 because if you're only bringing in 6 cards in some matchups, you want the 5 defensive options and the 1 Phoenix Flame. 2 Double Strike is here just because it's an extra 0 for 1. In the Guardians, I do tend to bring more than 60 cards, and Double Strike is just a card that helps me push through a little more damage, as well as it's a good card with Salt Winds and even Lava Bursts. And then finally, we just have some poppers. You could play some 3 for 7s because, of course, that one damn Herald of Triumph is so annoying. But we're just playing some 2 for 6s that have some added disruption. We will generally be bringing these in versus certain matchups most of the time. Command and Conquer threatens Arsenal. Can't play D-Reacts, just the strongest card. If you don't own this one, because I know it's a little expensive, you can play Blanche, Humble, or you can play Battlefront Bastion. Those 3 cards are great. Blanche, Battlefront, 3 for 7s, good into defending against Illusionists, and then Humble can shut off your opponent's hero ability, good disruption. If you're also worried about Ninja, you can play Amnesia. I wouldn't play anything other than those 4 if you don't have CNCs. So I would recommend CNCs if you can afford them. And then 3 copies of The Weakest Link. This is another card from Part the Misfail. Honestly, the generics in this set are absolutely insane. All 3 of the M's are really, really good. The Weakest Link is a 2 for 6 with 3 block. When this hits a hero, you look at their hand and you choose a card without base defense, and if you do, they discard it and you draw a card. This is really good versus our Mystic matchups, as some extra hand disruption can make your opponent get rid of some of their inner chi or some of their instants. As well as into a matchup like KO, they play a lot of cards without block, so you can force KO to get rid of them and then replace this card with an arsenal, which is pretty nice. The Weakest Link is fairly cheap right now. I think they're going a bit up. So if you can't afford this one, you can play any of the options I talked about with CNC. But with that, that's going to be the end of the deck list. I think this one was pretty short. So hopefully I didn't keep you all for so long. Next week, not sure what we are going to do. Maybe we take a look at some Iris Enigma. That's a deck I've been looking at and thinking about doing a deck review for. But, of course, that's for next week. Not sure what we're going to do just yet. But, with all that said, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.